So just like last time, I'm going to show you Hearthstone cards that you're going to guess.
Okay.
I have slightly played Legends of Runeterra, so I have a pretty good idea of cards that you have never seen before in Hearthstone.
Okay.
They also just released a cinematic for their upcoming expansion. And one thing the Hearthstone team really likes to do is release a new legendary to kind of build up hype for that expansion. The one that they released this time is super unique and super spicy, so I'm kind of excited to see what you think about it. This is Prince Renithol.
Deck size and starting health are 40. What are normal size?
So your normal deck size is 30 and your normal health is 30.
Uh-huh. And that's automatic. It just happens, right?
Yeah, so when you put him into your deck, it will just automatically add, I guess, like 9 extra slots because he would take up 1. And then right at the start of the game, you get 10 extra life.
Gotcha. Are you able to make more than 30 card decks in Hearthstone or not?
No, there are specific effects that would add cards to your deck at the start of the game. So for instance, there was a card called Prince Malchezaar, which added 5 random legendaries to your deck at the start of the game.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, so your deck size would always be 30, but there are cards like that that would add cards at the start of the game.
I think this is a neutral card, right? It can go in any deck.
Yes.
I'm gonna say this card is great, dude. I can't really see much. I mean, of course, you want your deck to be as thin as possible for most decks to have higher consistency, but in general, 33% more HP versus aggro, like that's just such a pain to get through. I think the card is going to be very heavily used. I'm guessing almost no card game ever designs their game for fatigue matches. Like nobody likes playing fatigue, so that's usually not something the devs want, but I'm going to say really strong.
Yeah, so this is a pretty interesting card, right? By the way, when we're recording this has only been out for a day, so I can only really give you the first impressions. At the moment, this card looks pretty great in some decks and pretty whatever in other decks. Obviously, like you said, adding 10 more life seems to actually be pretty impactful against a lot of these aggro decks, but you're also not considering the combo decks. A lot of combo decks have a certain amount of range that they can do, and that 10 extra life is actually ginormous.
Yeah.
Because they can't kill you in one turn anymore. Now, the issue with this is that against decks that are like mid-range and have a little bit more consistent endgame, this effect is obviously not as great because you're, like you said, your deck there's more junk in your deck in a sense, right? So it's not going to be as powerful in the late game. So it'll be interesting to see how great this card ends up being after people optimize decks. And obviously with more cards added to the standard format after this expansion comes out in the next one, this card probably even gets better because there's better card quality. But it'll be interesting to see. I was really curious to see what your thought process would be on this card because I don't think you guys have had a card like this in Runeterra, right?
No, we have not. If Hearthstone had like a million different cards and they were all great, this card would be like the best card in the game because there's no downside. But of course, the smaller the card pool, the more refined you want to make your deck, and less cards is always better unless every card is equal power. So
really, really cool card to give us right at the start of an expansion. So they also showed us a new type of card in Hearthstone that you have never seen before for sure. So you guys got landmarks in Runeterra?
Yes.
Which is, just for people who don't know, is it a card that you play and then every single turn, I think at the start of every turn, it like ticks down by 1 until it's finally finished. Is that how it works?
Exactly. Although I think there are landmarks that don't tick down at all, but most of them have a tick down, and they have an effect at the end or during the tick downs. Okay,
so they added a new card in Hearthstone called Locations, which is almost like a landmark, but rather than it ticking down at the start of a turn, it has a certain amount of durability that you can activate during your turn. So it doesn't just automatically tick down. You can choose when you want to use it.
And it takes up a spot for a minion, right?
Yes, yeah.
And can you use it the turn you play it?
I believe so, yes.
Muck pools. That looks really good, dude. Because like there's a lot of like minions in Hearthstone. I think they make it like tokens, right?
Yes.
Shaman, I know they have Murlocs at the very least. It summons a second Murloc, so that has to be like the craziest value I've ever seen. There are like units that don't have very strong bodies but have really strong effects. I don't know what you call them in Hearthstone, like battle cries or whatever.
Yeah.
So that looks bonkers. Like you get so much value off of bad bodies that already got the effect off. You play it and then you can just pop that the same turn. That looks amazing to me. For 1 mana, that looks insane. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but wow.
Yeah, so unfortunately, this card is not released yet, right? We can't play this one. I just wanted to see what your thought process was on this as well. But from a Hearthstone perspective, this card looks insane. The one angle you didn't even consider is that you could trade a minion into another minion and then just transform it immediately after.
Oh, okay, so it just heals, right?
When you transform into a minion, right, it becomes a completely different minion.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter what the health of the previous minion was because you're basically getting a brand new minion. And the fact that this is going to be on the board and you could use it whenever you want, you don't need an additional mana after you've already spent the 1 mana to put this on the board, looks insane. So like I 100% agree with you. And like in Runeterra, for example, you play a 7-cost minion, you trade into one of their followers, and then you get an 8-cost minion, and it's like you're so far ahead of your opponent. Like it's a really snowbally effect. And yeah, like you said, if you have like a really horribly statted Battlecry minion, you just use this and it makes it so much better. You already got the value from it. Yeah, this looks like a very powerful effect.
Similar cards exist in Runeterra, but not one so cheap. Even if you're not transforming anything, it's still, you're gaining 3 mana worth in 3 turns.
We haven't seen all the cards yet, obviously, like they're going to go through the reveal schedule, but can almost guarantee that there'll be a legendary or some kind of effect that says you can use locations multiple times in a turn, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Which means this card probably gets a little bit better. I'm very excited to see how good it actually ends up being. So what about this card?
Black Scale Brute, 7 mana, 5/6 Naga. Taunt, and as a battle cry, if you have a weapon equipped, summon a 5/6 Naga with Rush. Rush can hit face or not?
No, Rush cannot. Only a minion.
I want to say this looks really solid, although 7 mana is kind of late to just get vanilla minions on board. Even if one has Rush though. But he can't hit face, so there's no like OTK potential. My first guess is it's pretty good, but I'm going to assume since I played Hearthstone, cards have been power crept a lot, so maybe it's okay. 7 just seems just like, if it was 6, it would be kind of crazy in my head. But 7 is just a little bit, I don't know. I'm just going to say it's an okay card.
Interesting. This card has not really seen any play.
Interesting.
So, yeah, like you said, it's kind of slow, right? 7 mana, you could usually be doing something better, but also this card's kind of unique in the sense that what warrior deck do you really want this in? So you have to fulfill the condition of having a weapon equipped.
Yeah.
But like in an aggressive deck, this is kind of slow. There's not really a mid-range deck for warrior. You kind of want to go straight to control. So this card doesn't fit into control either. There's just better options, right? Because you're going to use this basically as removal, and there's just better removal. What about this card?
Blademaster Okani. Battlecry, secretly choose to counter the next minion or spell your opponent plays while this is alive. So they don't know if you're going to counter a minion or a spell. Is that what it's saying?
Yes, yeah. And counter is just basically make that spell or minion just void. So it doesn't do anything.
Oh man, that looks so cool. Like on one hand, it feels like a really good card versus like combo decks. Like if you know, for example, I don't know what combo, I'm guessing Rogue is a combo deck. If you know that like on mana 8, Rogue does their combo and you drop this on 7, you can choose exactly how to stop the combo if the opener is expensive. But in the same time, I feel like it's really easy to test for it because there should be a lot of like really cheap spells. Like you drop a 1-drop and it's like, okay, well, if it's minion, well, you just counter to 1 cost. And if you play a 1-cost minion and it's not minion, well, then you're free to play and you just wait to play a really cheap spell. It's like a disruptor card. It disrupts, but it has okay stat line as well. 4, 2, 6. Well, I don't know if that's okay, to be honest. So aggro would never play this, I think. Is it good versus aggro? Probably not. I'm going to say that the card sucks. I'm probably wrong here or something, but I think it sucks.
This card is being played currently in the metagame. I wouldn't say it's like meta defining, but it's definitely a powerful effect. This is like the major downside is that if there are minions on your opponent's board and you play this and they kill this card, it does nothing.
Oh, it does nothing? Wow.
Because your opponent has to play a card first for this to actually do something. Yeah. If you end up killing it, the effect is gone.
Okay.
Because it's no longer on the board, right?
Gotcha.
So that's like when this card is bad. So like you said, it doesn't trade very favorably at all. Like it's not a, it's a pretty great stat line for the effect because the effect can be very powerful.
Sure.
But it's not like a good minion stat line, if that makes sense. This card is being played because there's a lot more decks in the game right now that want to play bigger stuff. And if you could play Okani and they don't have a smaller spell to test for it, you make their turn extremely awkward. Now, when this card first came out, it saw a little bit of play, but it didn't see a ton of play. Now, because the metagame has slowed down a little bit, this card is pretty great. What about this card?
Smokescreen Rogue. Draw 5 cards. Trigger any death rattles drawn. Does Rogue have a lot of death rattles?
I will give you that. They did print synergistic cards with this. There's also a lot of neutral death rattles in the game.
I'm going to have to just fully guess on this one because I don't know what the death rattle cards are. I don't know how good the payoff is. Also, I don't know if there are any cards that can cheat this card out. I can imagine there being some kind of crazy combo with this if there's a way to cheat it out, not have to actually pay 8 mana for it, or be able to play multiples of it or something like that. I can't tell. I don't know. Because I don't know what the death rattle cards are. I can't think of the best or worst case scenarios. I mean, worst case, it's 8 mana, draw 5, do nothing. But if there's some crazy like 10 drop or even like 20 mana cost, impossible to play death rattle cards that win the game on their own, it could be insane. So I'm just going to guess it's good, hoping that there's some good cards that synergize with it.
I will answer your first question. You said, is there any way to mana cheat this? And there is a card. The card I just linked is like basically the mana cheating effect for this, which is you reduce the cost by 4 mana. But even with that card, it does not see play.
Yeah.
I think it's irrelevant of the death rattles because the problem of this card is that you have to build your deck with enough death rattles to actually see play. That makes your deck a little bit awkward because not only do you have to put enough death rattles for this card to be playable, but you also have to get to 8 mana if you're not going to run the Trickster.
Yeah.
And if you do run the Trickster, that is 2 more cards in your deck that are not death rattles whatsoever.
Sure.
And you need to get a 2-card combo for that to actually see play. This card has seen some niche play. Like it's not unplayable, but it's not a good card. It hasn't seen any meta play.
Gotcha.
What about this one?
Ooh, that's fun. 10 mana is always fun. Lockhaller, the Ice Lord, 8/8 Elemental Rush. Wind Fury costs 5 less if you have 15 health or less. 5 mana 8/8 Wind Fury is pretty good. I mean, that's really decent, but also a dead card if you don't have a deck that can get there really easily. I'm gonna say kind of bad.
I think this card would be classified as probably average. This card did see play in a couple of decks, so it definitely, I don't think it would be bad, but you want it in a very specific deck, right? This is not a combo card whatsoever. This is a card that you are either putting it into a deck that you know you're going to hurt yourself, or it's basically like an aggro tech. Because the thing about this card is that if you actually can kill 2 minions and it lives, this card is extremely scary.
Sure. Because
it's 16 damage on the next turn to your opponent's face, most likely. And your opponent now has to spend mana to kill this card. I think like your analysis was pretty close for what it is. All right, what about this card?
Goliaths Masterpiece. So it's an 8 mana 8/8 Battlecry fire 5 rockets at enemy minions that deal 2 damage each. Oh, you pick the targets.
Yes.
You can pick the same target twice or not.
The way that I'm going to envision this for you is like you click one button to do 2 damage to any target on the board, and then it gives you another option to do 2, and you can hit any target again.
So it's a 8 mana 8/8 deal 10 damage to the board.
Yes.
Oh man, I don't know what the state of 8 mana cost is these days, how good that is. My concern about it is that when you get to 8 mana, if you're facing control, I don't think this does much at all. Maybe it does a little bit. I guess it gives you an 8/8 and removes 1 unit, but I don't think it's killing any 8 drops, like outright, without that 8 drop getting some value. And versus aggro, I feel like mana 8's kind of late to do much. I assume this is a really good card because you haven't given me a really good card for a while. Unless today was just giving me all mediocre cards. So I feel like it's about time for something that's freaking epic. Or are you just scamming me and just going all bad cards?
I picked cards that I felt like would be more challenging for you based on what I've seen in Runeterra. Because you don't really have an effect like this, right? This is this is kind of like a Hearthstone only thing.
I'm going to say average.
This card is virtually unplayable in Standard.
Gotcha.
The only reason this really sees play is in very specific deck like Quest Priest, which you have to play an 8-drop to complete the quest.
Okay.
So you might put it there, but most of the time you're going to see this card in the standard format. It is discovered. It's generated.
Gotcha.
It's not like in your deck whatsoever. So like your analysis right at the start was entirely correct. Like this card is too slow by the time aggro really gets on the board. This is not going to come in time. And against control decks, like, yeah, you might kill a minion, right? But there's just better cards for that. Yeah. This card's really hard to evaluate from a Runeterra player because honestly, from an outside perspective, this card seems good. Like it's 8 mana 8/8, summon an 8 mana 8/8, kill any minion in the game basically at that point in time.
Sure.
But yeah, it just ends up being too slow, which is kind of interesting. What about this one?
Jackpot has to be great. Just look at that art.
Yeah, the art's fantastic.
Add 2 random spells from other classes that cost 5 or more to your hand. Huh. I like it. I like the card. I would play this if I was a rogue player. I mean, unless it was unplayable, but I would play this. I'm telling you. I don't know, dude. Like, you showed me the guy who makes spell cost 0. It's 5 or more, and you might be hitting some really, really high rolls. And also, there's the entire factor of you have no idea what your opponent just got, and you don't know what to play around now. It looks fun. I'm gonna say it's a pretty fun card. How good is it, though? It looks bad, but like it has to be time for a good card already. Yeah, this was a tough one, dude. Because I don't even know what the class card. I don't even know what cards are existing in Hearthstone. How good cards are that cost 5 more. I'm gonna say it's a good card. I would play it even if it was bad in Hearthstone. I think this is a played card.
This actually is a played card. It turns out that on average, spells you're getting from this are pretty great.
Yeah.
There are a few spells that are virtually unplayable that you can get from this, but they're very far and in between the really good spells. And there's also cards that synergize with getting other class cards into your hand. So this card becomes better because you can make those other cards stronger. I looked at the HS replay stats because I wanted to confirm it. It has a 50% win rate.
Nice, nice.
What about this card?
Entitled Customer. 6 mana, 3/2. Battle cry, deal damage equal to your hand size to all other minions. I love this card. My favorite kind of card in any card game is big board clears. And 6 is pretty damn cheap. And plus a body on top. Because I think back in the day, Warlock had like, what was it, 8 mana or 9 mana Black Hole, something like that? I forgot.
Yeah, 8 mana Twisting Nether.
Yeah, that's the one, Twisting Nether. And this is pseudo Twisting Nether. Now, of course, Death Rattles will pop. Divine Shield is a thing. It's just not as good, obviously. But, I mean, I like it. I would play it. I would try to build decks with it. I remember I built a lot of priest decks with a lot of AoE. Sure, I'm going to say at 6 mana, it's just cheap enough to stop aggro, I think. It doesn't deal damage to face. It gives you a block. It gives you a unit. I like it. I'm going to say pretty dang good. Like, very good.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's very good, but I would say it's good. This card does see play right now. It's a 6 mana board clear that leaves a body behind, and usually in the deck that you're playing this card is going to full clear the board. Like you're probably going to be tapping a lot, which is like using the Warlock Hero Power, drawing extra cards. And the best thing about this card is that the longer the game goes, the easier time you have to draw cards against these slower decks. This card actually kills a lot of big minions at once too, right? It's not just like for aggro.
I was also thinking like, because if you're playing Warlock Power early, which Warlock can do, at least they used to be able to do it, you're falling behind on board, and this is literally just paying you off for that kind of playstyle. So it just fits really easily into the deck.
Yeah, really good card. This card is going to be in the standard set for the next year, and I guarantee it's going to see play for the entire time it's here. What about this card?
Goldshire Knoll, 10 mana, 5/4. Whenever I see a 10 mana rare, I just think it's going to be trash, but let me have a look. Rush costs 1 less for each other card in your hand. So, control deck, having a 0 mana removal if you have a full hand. There's gotta be decks that are control that have very expensive cards. You end up with full hand states. I want to say it's a good card because in control, you can play decks that have a lot of draw and you can have full hand states, but this doesn't, the problem with this card in my head is it doesn't build towards any win condition whatsoever. And if you're playing 30 card decks, you're usually building towards something. And this is just literally a very, very average, just remove card. It doesn't work towards a win con. It only removes at best 1 unit. And even if it has a really good payoff at like 1 or 2 mana or 0 mana, deal 5, by the time you have a full hand anyway, I feel like you have much better options. I'm gonna say bad, but I might be way off.
Yeah, you're way off. This card's pretty good. It turns out that like if you could just play this on turn 3, which is when you're generally going to play it, sometimes you can even play it on turn 2 depending on what your hand is. You kill a minion and then generally this will stay alive to kill a second minion.
How do you play it on turn 2?
You can go like Warlock, coin tap to another card that potentially draws you a second card, and then you can play this. Oh, wow. There are certain ways you can end up playing this. Obviously, that doesn't happen very often. It's more like turn 3, turn 4. But even at turn 3 or turn 4, sometimes just 1-for-1ing to kill a 4-cost minion for 3 mana is just good enough, right? Because if your main win condition is just get to the late game, it is pretty great. So on average, this card is just decent, but it gets even better the earlier you can play it, because sometimes a 5-4 against an aggro deck would just win you the game because it's so much tempo you got back.
Yeah.
And your main win condition obviously is not going to be with the Goldshire Knoll, but your Goldshire Knoll pushes you towards that win condition because it's almost like just like a removal, right? You could look at it as a removal.
I just didn't see how do you play it that early. I was thinking like turn 6, 7, that you'd be having full hands.
Even if you don't get a good draw, right? So let's say you're a Warlock, you're playing Warlock and you're playing a slower deck, right? You start with 4 cards in your opening hand because you start with 3 and then you draw 1 immediately. So this card is 6. You draw another card the following turn, so it becomes 5, and then you tap, so it becomes 4. And then on turn 3, you draw another card, and then it becomes 3 mana.
Yeah.
Right? So it is very playable early on, depending on what deck you're playing.
Stealer of Souls, 6 mana, 4/6. After you draw a card, change its cost to health instead of mana. Super interesting card. I can imagine that you could set up some really crazy OTKs with this because you can draw like many cards on top of it on the turn you even play it. If your deck has a lot of draw, and let's say you're aggro, and you have a lot of aggro tools that do damage that same turn, that could just like finish somebody off from like, not from necessarily 30 to nothing, but quite fast. This is potentially extremely good. I'm going to go with that.
This card has a very interesting backstory. 6 mana, this card's unplayable.
Okay.
It's too slow. By the time you play it and to get like an insane amount, like you can almost consider this card like mana cheating, right? It's just too slow, unfortunately. Like it's the effect is really cool, whatever. But yeah, like by the time you actually get to play it, it's just too weak.
Yeah.
Now, this card was nerfed. It used to be 4 mana.
Oh, wow.
And at 4 mana, this card was extremely spicy. But not because of the card itself, it's just the synergistic aspect with this card. So this is the Demon Seed. This was released the expansion after, which is a quest for Warlock. So the quest line for this is basically taking damage on your turn to finish your quest. And the final reward that you get is this card right here, which you can read.
Battle cry for the rest of the game. Damage you take on your turn damages your opponent instead. Wow, that's pretty cool.
So basically what you would do is you would play this card on turn 4, like Stealer of Souls. There are ways to discount it too, so you can even get it cheaper. And you would complete that quest in 1 turn, and then you would play Thames in the following turn and kill your opponent. Because you would have so many cards that it just cost health now that your opponent would die.
Why can't you still do that?
The Demon Seed used to be a lot better. It used to be like take 6 damage for the first quest line, and then it was less damage for the second one as well. So they nerfed both of these cards because the Demon Seed was also considered a very toxic card for what Warlock can do, but it just ends up being too slow. There's just better win conditions in the game now. You probably could if you really wanted to, but it's just harder to pull off. This card though, in Wild, even though like this is not what you're reviewing for, was banned. One of the few cards ever to be banned in a format for Hearthstone because it just was too ridiculous. All right, what do you think of this card?
Druid of the Plains, Rush, 7 mana, 7/6. Frenzy. What's Frenzy?
So Frenzy is if they take damage and survive.
It's a rush and it turns to 6/7 with taunt afterwards. I'm gonna have to compare it to the Warrior card. The Warrior was a 7 mana 5/6 rush, and this is a 7/6 rush. But the 5/6 rush can survive and give you 2 units, whereas the 7/6 survives and gives you 1. Is this ever better than the Warrior one? I almost feel like Druid can get away with it when Warrior can't. There's no need to have a weapon, first of all, which the Warrior one had. So that's one upside. The other upside is, if I'm not mistaken, Druid had mana ramp. I don't know if it still runs mana ramp. And this seems like a good card for mana ramp just to stabilize. It'll remove anything. Like if it's mana 7, your opponent's on mana 5, it'll kill anything and will almost guarantee Frenzy. And it does kill really big, annoying HP units, like maybe 3 7s or whatever. And furthermore, because it's 6/7 just seems a lot better than 5/6. I'm gonna say pretty dang decent.
See, you know what's surprising is that I thought the same thing as you when I saw this card, but it turns out it's also not super good.
No?
I don't know. Honestly, I feel like maybe there's just better options for Druid. Maybe this is why this card doesn't see play, but like in a vacuum, this card just looks good, right? Like if this card lives with 1 health, you get a 6/7 with taunt. Like that seems good, right? But
sure. Yeah,
unfortunately, it just doesn't see any play. I would think that the main reason for it is that there's just better cards to use, but I'm curious what the draw win rate of this card is. Oh, it doesn't even have data for it because it's so weak. Wow.
Unplayable.
Times played in the last 14 days is 11 times.
Jesus, that's horrendous.
So this is the last card I'm going to show you. This is, again, one of the newer cards that I can't really tell you how good it's going to be, but I'm just very curious to hear your evaluation of this.
Let's see it.
All right.
Baroness Vash. If this would transform into a minion, summon that minion instead. Ooh, that looks spicy. Ooh. Free 5 costs, or maybe even free 6 cost minions. That's pretty cool, dude. Are there a lot of cards that transform in terms of like cost?
I would say at the moment in standard, there's not a ton, but the fact that this card and the location card that I showed you is being printed, they're probably going to release a couple more.
I think this is going to be bonkers. I'm going to be honest, but only because of the 1 cost. Because if you play 1 cost on mana 1, it starts getting value in mana 2, mana 3, and then mana 4. And this is just such a good 4-drop to transform. It curves perfectly onto the 3rd transformation. Because on mana 1, you can't transform anything, right? Because you've already spent your 1 mana, unless you have a 0-cost card you played. So this is just like the perfect curve for it. And you don't really need the 1 cost, because I'm guessing there are going to be other transform cards as well. it just looks like a value. And the good thing is you're never going to lose the value because you drop, you transform the same turn. So you don't need mana to transform it. Like it'll always proc on turn 4 if you have the location on turn 1. I think that location card is going to be nutty. So if that's the case, this is just like one of the perfect cards to go along with it.
Yeah, see, I agree with that, but you want to like the other crazy side of this that someone in chat said to me was if someone tries to actually like there's polymorph, you remember, right?
That's
you try to polymorph this card, it doesn't get polymorphed, right? Which is kind of insane. That's a very unique effect that we've never seen in Hearthstone. So this card is so versatile and it's like a must kill card because if you're putting this into your deck, you're probably doing a lot of evolve or transform things, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I think your evaluation is really spot on. It looks really good. Like it looks insane. So it'll be really cool to see how well it actually performs when the expansion comes out.